Picture this. You're cruising down the highway in a car that weighs, easily, 2,000 kilograms. Suddenly, you need to stop. What do? You just casually reach out with your foot, give a tiny pedal a little push, and boom, that massive speeding chunk of metal comes to a dead halt. Think about the crazy physics going on there for just a second. The tiny little push from your foot is practically nothing compared to the massive momentum of that car. So how on earth does that work? Well, by the time we wrap up this explainer, you're going to know exactly how that seemingly magical light tap gets the job done. We're going to dive right into something called Pascal's principle. We'll break down the concept, look at the surprisingly simple math that makes it tick, and see exactly how to apply it to real-life mysteries, just like our car brake situation. Section 1. The open versus enclosed fluid. To really get how these systems work, we have to start by looking at what actually happens when we try to push on different kinds of liquids. Imagine you're standing knee-deep in a flowing river. You put your hands in the water and give it a big shove. What happens? Basically nothing, right? The water just flows right around your hands and escapes. That is what we call an open system. But what if that fluid is trapped and has nowhere to go? Think about the human heart for a second. When a chamber inside your heart fills up with blood and those valves shut tight, that blood is now trapped in an enclosed system. It literally cannot escape. So when the heart muscle squeezes and pushes on that blood, the force doesn't just slosh the liquid around. Instead, it drastically cranks up the internal pressure. That fundamental difference, the fact that you can easily spike the pressure of an enclosed fluid just by pushing on it, well, that's the starting line for everything we know about fluid statics. Which brings us to Section 2, defining Pascal's principle. Now that we've got the basic vibe of an enclosed fluid, let's look at the exact rule that makes it behave the way it does. This is Pascal's principle in a nutshell. It tells us that a change in pressure applied to an enclosed fluid is transmitted undiminished to all portions of the fluid and to the walls of its container. Now, I want you to zero in on one very specific word there, undiminished. That word is an absolute game changer. It's the whole secret to this explainer. Because the atoms in a fluid can slide around freely, if you create a high-pressure pocket in one tiny corner of a sealed pipe, that exact same pressure instantly spreads out equally everywhere inside that container. It doesn't fade out, it doesn't weaken, it is transmitted undiminished. Now, before we jump into the math, I've got to share this totally wild fact about the guy who actually figured this out. Blaise Pascal was a brilliant French philosopher and scientist, but get this, he was actually homeschooled by his dad, who completely forbade him from studying math. He literally hid all the math books from him until he was 15. But, tell a kid they can't do something, and what do? It completely backfired. By the time he was 12, Pascal was secretly teaching himself geometry. And despite being banned from math as a kid, he grew up to invent the very first mechanical digital calculator and totally rewrote the rulebook on fluid dynamics. Just incredible. All right, moving on to Section 3. The math behind hydraulics. Let's step away from the history lesson and hit the whiteboard so we can actually build this formula step by step. Okay, so here's how these 3 simple steps connect to give us our magic formula. Step 1, just by basic definition, pressure equals force divided by area. P equals F over A. Simple enough, right? Step 2. Thanks to our buddy Pascal, we know that if we have 2 pistons in a closed system at the exact same height, the pressure at piston 1 is identical to the pressure at piston 2. They are perfectly equal because, remember that magic word, the pressure is undiminished. Step 3, we just plug our definition of pressure right into that equality. So the force at piston 1 divided by its area absolutely must equal the force at piston 2 divided by its area. Boom. F1 over A1 equals F2 over A2. Let's head into Section 4, real-world force multipliers. Now, just thinking about a math equation can be pretty dry, so let's make this totally concrete with an example and tie it straight back to that car braking problem we talked about at the very beginning. So, what we're talking about here is a classic hydraulic system. When you stop on your car's brake pedal, you're actually pushing down on a really small cylinder, which we call the master cylinder. Let's say you push with a force of 100 newtons, and that cylinder has an area of just 1 unit. According to Pascal, that pressure gets transmitted flawlessly through the brake fluid lines down to a slave cylinder right at your wheels. But here is where the math gets genuinely awesome. If that slave cylinder down at the wheel is, say, 5 times larger in area, your original 100 newtons of input force instantly transforms into 500 newtons of output force. Because the pressure has to stay exactly the same, but the area got bigger, the force absolutely has to increase to keep the whole ratio balanced. You've essentially just built a force multiplier. Actually, hold on, let's pause for a quick second. I want to point out that human engineers are definitely not the only ones who use this trick. Take a guess at what this number 25 is all about. Well, out in nature, the jumping spider literally uses biological hydraulics built right into its legs. By pumping body fluid into its legs, the spider creates an internal pressure spike that multiplies its leg force so drastically it can leap 25 times its own body length in a single bound. Nature is just wild. Let's look at section 5, the energy catch. Now, if you're really paying attention to this massive multiplication of force, you're probably asking yourself a classic, very smart student-style question right about now. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, if I put just 100 newtons in and I magically get 500 newtons out, are hydraulic machines just creating free energy out of thin air? Doesn't that completely break the fundamental law of the conservation of energy? The answer, of course, is no. You aren't breaking the universe. Here is the physical trade-off you have to make. To get that incredibly massive force output at the end, your input cylinder, that little master cylinder, has to be pushed a much longer distance. The big slave cylinder on the other end is going to push with a massive crushing force, sure, but it's only going to move a tiny, tiny fraction of that distance. See, in physics, work is defined as force times distance. Because your foot pushes the brake pedal a relatively long distance but with low force, and the brake pads clamp down moving a very short distance but with incredibly high force, the total work input exactly equals the total work output. Nothing is created from nothing. A hydraulic system is essentially just acting like a liquid lever. It cranks up the force, but the total amount of work you do remains exactly the same. Section 6, the crass host experiment. Let's put this whole concept to the test with one more totally practical, real-life scenario that shows exactly what happens when you underestimate the power of fluid mechanics. Picture this. You've got a host at a dinner party who decides to consolidate all the leftover wine by pouring the remnants of several bottles into one big jug. He fills the liquid all the way to the very brim, creating a perfectly enclosed fluid system. Then he grabs a small cork, just about 2 centimeters wide, shoves it into the neck of the jug and aggressively pounds it down with, let's say, 120 newtons of force. And then he jumps back, completely stunned, when the entire bottom of the jug, which is 14 centimeters wide, instantly explodes into shattered glass. So why on earth did that happen? Well, if we look back at our formula, the ratio of that tiny little cork area to the much larger area of the jug's bottom means his 120 newtons of force was multiplied massively. The extra force shoving against the glass bottom instantly became 5,760 newtons. The glass literally never stood a chance. And we're at section 7, summary and final thoughts. That right there is the terrifying and incredible power of enclosed fluid dynamics. Before we completely wrap up this explainer, let's do a quick rundown of the critical takeaways we've covered. First off, remember the baseline. Pressure is just force per unit area. Second, the golden rule of the day. Enclosed fluids transmit pressure completely undiminished to all parts of the fluid and the container walls. Third, we can use this exact principle to engineer hydraulic systems, using the formula F1 over A1 equals F2 over A2 to create absolutely incredible force multipliers. And finally, don't forget the energy catch. Work input always equals work output. You aren't getting free energy, you are simply trading distance for force. I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. Everything we have talked about today relies heavily on liquids, which are largely incompressible. You can't really squeeze them smaller. But what happens to this entire principle and to our nice, neat math formula if the enclosed fluid is highly compressible? Like, what if it was air instead of water? Think about how a squishy air pocket might just absorb that pushing force instead of transmitting it undiminished. That one simple change completely flips the engineering on its head. And honestly, figuring out how that works is a fantastic reason to join us for our next explainer. So keep learning, keep asking questions.